Welcome back to One on One, New York's longest running sports call-in show. You normally hear from Fordham Athletic Director Ed Kull about things Fordham Rams related, but he's also a diehard New York sports fan, and we welcome him onto the show. Ed, thanks for being here.
Great to be with you, Manny. Great to be with everybody, and I hope everybody's doing well, staying healthy, staying positive during this continued COVID times. Great to be with you, and great to talk a little bit about some sport competitions. And though I'm happy all of our varsity athletic teams are practicing and working out today, I definitely can speak for them. I know we're missing some games, so great to talk to you about some professional sports.
So, Ed, you are a diehard New York Mets fan. They wrapped up the season, fell short of the playoffs in the expanded 8-team format. What's your overall takeaway with how this Mets season went down?
Yeah, so diehard Mets fan. I know that may be tough working in the Bronx and having being Fordham home in the Bronx. But I grew up in Queens, so that was home for me in Flushing, and Shea Stadium was my daily stopping grounds. And I love baseball. The Mets were a difficult season, a very challenging time. I think we all knew 60 games would be a weird kind of small sample size of a season. And between COVID testing and travel limitations and injuries, which we saw a lot of throughout sports, we still do, we knew it would be interesting. But we kind of hope you'd have a good stretch there of 20, 25 games of good baseball. And that could, 500 baseball got you in the playoffs this year, as we see from the Marlins and so forth. So really disappointing for the Mets. I think a lot of hopes. As you know, change in ownership this summer, last few months. So a lot of buzz there. But unfortunately, as a Mets fan, I'm a little bit used to disappointment. That's kind of where we are again.
And I think the real disappointment was the lack of pitching depth that cost them this year. They brought in guys like Rick Porcello and Michael Wacha, but really beyond Jacob deGrom, who had another terrific season. You can't say enough about the guy. It just seemed like the Mets didn't have enough answers. And had they snuck in, they would have been a really tough team in a 3-game series. But I feel like they definitely would have gotten exposed in a 5-game series.
That's for sure. And as always with baseball, I think pitching and defense wins games. And it's disappointing for the Mets because an organization that's known for their pitching, even going back to the World Series in 15 where they lost to the Royals, and the wild card game in 16 where Syndergaard lost to Madison Bumgarner. The Mets always had this young rotation of then Harvey, deGrom, Syndergaard, Matz. You mix in a little Stroman, you mix in Bartolo Colon back then, and some arms that they put together. You kind of thought they had a young rotation that would last forever. So it's a little disappointing looking back in terms of how that has not panned out. And besides deGrom, who was definitely special and probably was a few starts away this year of a third consecutive Cy Young, pitching is an issue. So just not reliable, and all the way through the bullpen. I'd say, even we all know about Edwin Diaz, and that trade has not been a good one for Brody, and might be the downfall of Brody during this stretch. But it's the pitching consistency just hasn't been there, and the health hasn't been there over years. And it was definitely deGrom or bust this short season.
So looking ahead, you mentioned Steve Cohen. He takes the reins. That's the best news for Mets fans in honestly several years, because now you have an owner who's in here completely committed to spending and building a winner. What do you look for this offseason right off the bat with Steve Cohen taking the reins? What do you want to see the Mets reinforce? Where do you want to see them go moving forward?
As a Mets fan, I definitely am excited about Steve Cohen and the change in ownership. And before I get into Steve, I would also say I was very much rooting for and excited about Jennifer Lopez and Alex Rodriguez's group. They had two gentlemen, Mike Rapoli and Vin Viola, who have been longtime friends of Fordham and longtime supporters of Fordham. So there would have been a little bit of Fordham connection there if that group would have won the bid and won the ownership. So I was pulling for them. Those are dear friends and great supporters. And so I was hoping that would have worked out. But I know Steve Cohen is definitely a sincere Mets fan. Obviously, he's financially and personally committed to this team. And I know it's been a long time coming, where the first, negotiation with him didn't work out. Glad the next one did. And the Mets, I think it's time we all agree that it was time for a change, time for an ownership feel, and almost a little bit of the culture and environment, right, Manny, in terms of how they handle business, interact with the media, communicate with the fans. I think the business style and the business approach, I think all Met fans were looking for a a different approach here and a time for a different change. And I think this is it. Obviously, he presents himself as somebody that's willing to roll up his sleeves and whatever it takes to create a winner. And I like that. It's a very seems very personal for Steve in terms of local fandom and growing up here locally.
I think I agree there. There are some things that are just unexplainable, unquantifiable when you talk about culture changes, ownership changes, and you bring in someone like Steve Cohen, you start to establish that aura around a franchise where you show up and you expect special things, you expect to win. I think that's something the Yankees have had for several years, and kudos to the Steinbrenner family and, of course, everything, the infrastructure around them. You just show up to Yankee Stadium, and it feels a little bit different. I think the Mets have been lacking in that regard. It's something they could restore with Steve Cohen.
I couldn't agree more. I smile a little bit because I thought you were going to say there's something unexplainable about the losing of the Mets, and I'm also a Jets fan, Manny. So like,
same.
It's in the, I think it's in the same water of Jet fans and Mets fans of losing, and I guess of late you could say the New York Knicks as well. But I was listening to our good friend and our loyal one Michael Kay yesterday in his ESPN show, and he was talking about, you know, even the Yankees have that aura, right? They're just like the premium, superior brand and product, and they do no wrong and they don't make bad moves. But even Michael Kay was talking about how, you know, Steinbrenner had his up and downs through his years up until they started consistently winning, and obviously in the '90s through that dynasty, you know, it's been a huge ride for them, a successful ride for them. But I agree. I just think there's something about winning teams and how they present themselves, and even in baseball, stay with baseball, whether it be the Cardinals, you know, you see it obviously the Dodgers a little bit in terms of their history, and there's kind of those organizations that just smell like winners, right? The Patriots, how they've done their blueprint, and no matter who the players are, no matter how it's interchanged, their style of organization, their style of business, the way they go about handling themselves is so consistent. And I think the Mets, unfortunately, have just kind of given off a little bit of a roller coaster ride of ups and downs. And I think there's everybody's very much excited for that new leadership, new aura, new confidence, new professionalism, new way of doing things. And, you know, they have a wonderful stadium. I can't say enough about Citi Field. I think it came out terrific. I think it's a great stadium to bring your family to and watch a game. So that's in place. And then hopefully Steve Cohen can figure out the rest in terms of building the winner that everybody desperately wants.
Good free agent class coming up. You have guys like JT Realmuto and Trevor Bauer. Let's talk about the Jets briefly, because you referenced them, and it's hard as a fan because you don't only have the consistent losing and some people would say ineptitude and disorder within the franchise, but it doesn't seem like there's an end in sight. And whatever will happen with Sam Darnold and Adam Gase and whatever's going to be addressed, it just doesn't seem like there's that accountability and that level of acknowledgement of what's going on. And that makes the fan feel as helpless as ever from a Jets perspective.
Yeah, I think you're spot on there where, you know, the drama seems so intense and, you know, only in New York, and after week 2, everybody's on the T. Lawrence draft pick #1 mode already and looking at their new quarterback out of Clemson and hoping Lawrence sits out the year so he's healthy and he can be there for them at the first pick. And only in New York, and the intensity and the passion and the love of sports and fandom and the fanatics get behind that. And yeah, you know, I think it's interesting. Adam Gase, obviously, he's taking a lot of that heat. And I think even ownership takes a lot of heat. You know, what's interesting today, Manny, and it probably resides a lot in your wheelhouse and your industry and your desired business here of communications. You know, the world of Aaron Boone's, and they talk about, you know, coaches that communicate well, and even the Nets seem to be going through some of that, right, with Steve Nash now, but Kyrie Irving and Kevin Durant are involved in decision-making process, and whether that be coach or transaction of players, you know, it's almost like the over-communication is necessary, and that's internally and externally to fans. So a guy like Adam Gase, who maybe doesn't want to say too much to the media or want to be too brash as compared to a Rex Ryan or someone like that, it's really looked upon as a negative. And unless you're Bill Belichick and just winning Super Bowls every single year, you better be friendly, you better be nice, you better be respectful, and you better communicate well and kind of show your emotion, show your personality. Otherwise, it's tough town to not win in.
So I think there are benefits and there are drawbacks because you have the new school, very communicative type of manager who's more of a relayer of signals than anything else. And then you have the old school manager who's in your face. And then you have something in between. And while it's definitely heading in the communicative type direction, someone like Aaron Boone, you saw game 2 the other day that could end up being the decisive game of this Yankees-Rays series when it's all said and done. He's basically just carrying out the wishes of a collaborative effort, a front office type effort. And that doesn't always sit well with the fans, especially when it blows up in your face like it did with Davy Garcia getting pulled after an inning and Jay Happ not delivering in that bulk reliever type role. So there are benefits. There are certainly drawbacks because you can't always chalk it up to, hey, Aaron Boone made that decision. No, it goes way further than that.
Yeah, if the Yankees lose game 4 and, they lose game 4 and the series is over, everybody goes back to game 2 in terms of that decision-making process with Garcia and then going to Happ and the opener or / opener, whatever their intention was. And I know they wanted to alter the Rays lineup, or they thought that would cause them to switch. And even the Rays joked around, some of the players, it was Brendan Lau, was like, oh, kind of a Rays type of thing to do against the Rays. And it may have been a little bit too cutesy in terms of the idea or the strategy. And, I do think I think today's game and in all sports, there's a lot of folks involved, from data analytics to scouting, to personnel that have different perspectives. And to your point, there are a lot more collaborative decisions than individual decisions. And I think you're seeing that in all sports today. And I think when it works well, it works well. When it doesn't, we have to blame somebody, especially in New York, in terms of the pressure and the love, and the fandom is so strong. But I think, I think there's kind of a healthy balance of old school, new school, and then of course the technology base, and trying to get ahead of some little findings or niches that could be helpful. And I think the Rays, honestly, to flip it on that conversation, Manny, are the perfect example of that. So $28 million payroll. Garrett Cole makes more than the entire Rays salary for a year. And, whether they're shifting or putting 4 outfielders out there, or, making switches mid-game, they have established a lot of protocol based off of data and the evaluation of talent way differently than everybody else. And you got to tip your cap to them. They've done an incredible job. And going back to my Mets fandom, I actually wanted them to hire Bloom for that reason. I kind of thought the Rays approach was really futuristic and very innovative and very different, and didn't get too stuck on personal or visual facts, more about the data and stats and proven over time. And so the Rays represent the other side of that too. Now, with that said, if they had a larger payroll, how could that look? And does that give you more of a leash to make mistakes, or less of a leash to make mistakes?
It's a good point, because no one's going to point as a Rays fan and say what you're doing is wrong, because they have such a small payroll, and year in, year out, they're competitive. They're right there. So if the data is going to point you in one direction, especially with a payroll like that, it's so remarkable that they're in a situation entering tonight's game. We're recording this on Friday, where you have a pitcher who's making more than your entire team combined, and you win one game and you can advance to the American League Championship Series. It's really a cool sports storyline when you think about it.
It is. And I would even bring it another way, Manny, of, I know we'll talk a little about the Yankees pitching and some of their struggles and lack thereof, but even the Yankees' success, and don't get me wrong, Stanton is having a tremendous series, and, like a true Yankee rising to your occasion in the postseason when it matters the most. But the guys that have carried them are creative Cashman moves, which is a Voit from the Cardinals, and a DJ LeMahieu that nobody wanted in free agency, a Gleyber Torres that was flipped because of Chapman, Gio Urshela, who was cut from 2 different teams, and my favorite player, being a former catcher, and I think to me the MVP of this series is Kyle Higashi, who caught last night and was really saved the Yankees defensively and offensively. And as everybody's forgotten about who Gary Sanchez is. And those creative moves were not money spent. It was actually evaluation of talent. So it's interesting when you kind of have that conversation of of the idea of buying the best players. I think both sides show you it's really important to have strong talent evaluation.
It really is. And when you look at this season as a whole from a Yankee standpoint, everyone's going to say championship or bust, but I think it's a really interesting discussion moving forward. If they don't win the World Series this year, where do they go? How do they construct this team moving forward? Because they've had 3 or 4 cracks at this now with this core, this great assembly of young talent, complemented by the big money moves, the Stantons and the Coles. But you're eventually going to have to pay up for some of these players, including Aaron Judge, who's going to be on the market in just a couple of years and has had a tendency to get hurt. So I think there's a really fine balance and discussion to be had about where this Yankee team goes from here. And it puts a premium on, like fans would say, winning it all this year and getting that 28th title.
Yeah, I think what comes along with the Yankee brand, as we discussed a little bit earlier, and the expectations to win the World Series or bust, right? Anything less than that is unacceptable from the Yankee Nation, the Yankee universe. And but I think in terms of this year, if they're unable to achieve that goal, and I love Brian Cashman, and I'm a Mets fan, and you got to be impressed with a GM who's lasted 3 decades in New York City as a general manager, and the number of World Series and the pressure and the stress levels of that. But he's going to be criticized for not adding more pitching to this rotation. I know there was injuries with Severino, and I know Herman, and even obviously, so I know, and even Paxton. So I know they had injuries in that rotation, but even at trade deadline to not bring on some more arms, I know the pressure is going to be on Brian there in terms of having to explain that or justify that. So I hope that's not the case. I hope that's not the case in terms of landing him, because I think the talent level is there. The lineup is just tremendous, and the depth in that lineup is tremendous. And I think the bullpen is incredible as well, right? So it's really trying to get some quality innings at that starting rotation. And if that's going to be, obviously, they're going to take Garrett Cole as far as they possibly could take him, and seeing what they have. Garcia may have to come back out and get some innings as well. We'll see.
And Ed, I think we can leave on this note. New York is hungry for a winner. We really are in this town. You have the Mets, who haven't won since '86. The Knicks haven't won in forever. The Jets haven't won in forever. The Giants were pretty much our most recent staple of consistently winning championships. They've gone through a rough patch. And while the Yankees are relevant every year, and you can't thank them enough for that, they haven't won in 11 years. So as we look forward to the rest of this year, New Yorkers, even if you're not a Yankee fan, got to be pushing for some winning in New York, especially with everything that's gone on this year.
I couldn't agree more. I think it'd be great, especially during the pandemic and these COVID challenging times. And the city has been the epicenter of that for a lot of these months, and still continuing to feel a lot of the pain from this circumstance. The Yankees could be a real good pain relief for a lot of folks, and for the city, I do hope for that. And I agree, Jets and Giants both 0-4. The Knicks, nobody has any hope for anymore. Even the Nets are kind of saying they don't need a coach, that Kevin and Kyrie can coach their own team, which is an interesting philosophy. I've never heard that one before. But I want to give kudos to, and I am now a Long Island transplant. I know you are as well, Manny. Even though I grew up in the city in Brooklyn, Queens, and love working at my new home here in the Bronx with Fordham, I'm a Long Island guy. You got to give, I know we haven't caught up recently, got to give kudos to the New York Islanders, Manny. That was a heck of a run. And talk about quickly salvaging a disaster of a situation. Lou Amarillo, Mount Rushmore of quality human beings and sports GMs and administrators and presidents. What he's done there is quite impressive. I'm not a huge hockey guy. I'm not pretending to be. But that Islanders had Long Island buzzing a little bit, and obviously it would have been nice to go further. But you got to tip your cap to the Islanders. They've really made a tremendous success there.
Barry Trotz is a wizard. Wherever he goes, he seems to always work his magic and find a way to get it done. Ed, it was great talking some New York sports with you. Keep up the great stuff. We look forward to a full year coming up of Fordham Athletics. Great job weathering this storm, and we'll catch up soon.
Manny, you're the best. Thank you for having me. Always will be tuning into your show. Appreciate it.